How often do you think of the shadow you cast on the world? Today we explore a deep and increasingly disturbing topic: the 7 sins that will grow worse before the end of time. Wisdom literature informs us that there are behaviors and attitudes that, if left unchecked, could be a sign of doomsday coming. This week we make a special video where we explore how these sins are already a part of our society and how you can help fight them. We will explore egoism, greed, immorality, and more in search of a better world. And yet, in this new world of connections spanning the globe, most of us feel more isolated than ever. The culprit behind both of these seemingly opposed consequences of new media technology has at its heart the first of the 7 deadly sins: egoism, the obsession with individualism. Egoism has become a defining and overarching feature of modern life, driven by social media and what some refer to as a growing culture of the self. We have become a culture of me's and, in parallel with this focus on individualism, a society where the me has been placed above the we. From unwillingness to help others to policies that promote top-heavy economic efficiencies and welfare structures that cater to the few over the many. A fragile ecosystem that breeds egoism drives a growing callousness towards others, not only locally but also on a global scale. In this segment, I hope to lift the cover from the box of egoism, encouraging us to face the explosion of the me not only in our own homes but also in our communities. How do we get from a culture of me to a culture of we? The exploration of egoism in 7 psychological death traps will, hopefully, provide us with the tools to excavate, recover, and resurrect the community we have lost. In our current age of brilliant technological innovations and unimaginable wealth, the sin of greed takes on new forms. The drive not only for acquisition, but for more and more. More money, more status, more, takes ever greater numbers of people and corporations not just close to the edge of ethical diminishment, but to the precipice of full-fledged recklessness. It cries out, disparagingly, in the vast space between haves and have-nots, in the continued exploitation of labor, the hoarding of vital resources, and the blindness to the suffering. Sound travels on the back of the groaning of the planet beneath the massive elephantine footprint of consumption, and yet, consumption nonetheless appears ready for more. In this segment, we look at the sin of greed, not only in its impact on society and upon the earth, but also in the emptiness and the loneliness it brings with it. With illustrative examples and thoughtful reflections, the viewer is challenged to take into account the real cost of greed, both to those affected by it and to life itself, as we ask if it is possible to reframe success in terms other than the continuing fervent pursuit of more money and more power. Lives and the future might well depend upon the answer. As we move further into the shadows of the end times, immorality becomes overwhelmingly dominant in cultural trends and mores, as we are warned about it in Scripture from 2 Timothy 3:1-5. Thus, know this also, that in the last days perilous times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. Wherever we look today, these words seem to feel more relevant than ever. There are so many forms of immorality that surround us, from the normalization of violence and deceit in the entertainment media, to the casualization of marriage and sacred commitments, to the glorification of ephemeral happiness over deeper, longer-lasting values of temperance, solidarity, and respect for the sanctity of life, that serve as illustrative references for us in this segment, where we must ask, how do we react to an increasingly immorality society? In equating examples of contemporary behavior with the warnings of biblical prophets about the decline of morality, we are prompted to think not just about what these actions mean for us as societies, but also what steps Scripture provides for us to alleviate their impact. and how to return to gentle, compassionate, loving, respectful, faithful, and God-loving communities. What better way to image it than in the brutally honest word of blasphemy that cuts away the vain connection to the divine? In the Bible, Leviticus 24:16 states, "And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him." Blasphemy splinters the covenantal relationship between God and his creation. Today, it is more often expressed in deeds and attitudes that offend reverence and the sacred, and which threaten to destroy respect for what is believed to be holy. The tug of the modern and the ancient, of freedom of expression and respect for what is considered sacred, of offense, is experienced in our everyday lives and media. How far should be pushed the right to offend and to be offended? How do we balance love of neighbor and love of God? Where is the border between vanity and true humility? In casting a jaundiced eye upon the variety of ways in which blasphemy permeates the very media, art, and public discourse of our days, we ask what breaking from the sacred means to us, as a society and as spiritual creatures. Can we walk once more towards a place of respect and dialogue, and away from those self-appointed gatekeepers of faith that are the roadblocks to deeper knowledge and understanding of what it is to exist in the cosmos through our sense of divine transcendence? In the quickening pace of technology we live in, I think complacency is arguably the deadliest of the 7 deadly sins, because it's also a deadliest spiritual enemy, a subtle but steady sin that begins to shape our lives without our even noticing. And it's a sin that all too often gets woven into the fabric of our lives. It is a sin that keeps us from breaking away from the status quo of how we have always experienced and known and believed something. Complacency leads us to believe that this will just have to do, there's no need to do that or get into this or change that. Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Revelation 3:16 also says, "Because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth." I'm glad God levels this judgment at the sin of complacency, because it is so much easier to be passive about our spiritual lives than it is to be active. Easier to go with the flow than to create the flow. Easier to let our faith be shaped by others than to shape it ourselves. And easier not to be open to God's invitation into more abundant life. Complacency shows itself among us today in our indifference towards social wrongs, in our carelessness in destroying God's creation, and our disengagement from community. This segment of the 7 is perhaps the most personal. Each of us is privileged to try to awaken from our slumber of complacency, to become dispassionate participants in this world. As we interact with each other, and as we look within, arrogance can become an enemy to empathy and understanding. This sin, identified by pride and a sense of the dangers of superiorism, can also set one up to experience the loneliness of pride rather than the humility that Scripture encourages. We read in Proverbs 16:18 that pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Today, arrogance can masquerade as confidence or ambition. The person who is blinded by pride does not easily realize it. Most of us can see this overweening pride in our relationships with others. This sin can be seen in the person who refuses to listen to the other side of the story, in the person who devalues the contributions of others, and in the inclination to think that my way is the best way. In this section, we will discover that arrogance not only makes us less willing to grow and learn, but it also divides society. Humility, the alternative sin to arrogance that invites us to grow and learn from others, can end up bringing people together. Arrogance forgets to ask for help. Humility seeks the wisdom of others. Where arrogance separates, humility invites. Ingratitude is an artful thread in the rich tapestry of human emotions and virtues. When unchecked, it has subtle ways of weakening the fabric of human society and stunting the growth of our spiritual life. Gratitude is a choice known by the person whose heart is open to the abundance of life's extraordinary gifts, and still more so, to the greatest gift that allows us to be a presence in this world, the Most High Creator that has furnished His bountiful creation with untold opportunities for enjoying life. God grant that we not be selfish or diminish what He has provided for us. A telling example is the story in the Gospels where one of the 10 lepers, cured of their ailment, returns to give thanks. Luke 17:11-19. That one person humbly and sincerely expresses gratitude is rare, and remember, it is within us. Gratuity is and should be an expression we profess over and over to the person who establishes the very foundation of our lives, God Himself. God in His greatness enables us to experience life's blessings. The combination of today's fast-paced, achievement-oriented culture tends to obscure the practice of gratitude or the habit of pausing to savor what has been given to us, and moreover, may give birth to a kind of unique ingratitude. Aren't we rather prone to want and demand more, rather than to think of the numerous provisions we do have from the genuine, good things that surround us? We must remember that ingratitude can come in an avalanche of forms. Ingratitude towards the natural world in which we live and its fruits, and without a doubt, ingratitude towards our fellow men, who enrich our lives day by day. Let us reflect on our own ingratitude. The Creator has given us far more than we could have ever asked or imagined. There has always been more than enough to share. Are we grateful enough in our conduct, our choices, our speech and sounds? Is gratuity a practice we are willing to attempt, so that we can stop, pause, and look and see that life is rich with what we can savor, enjoy, nourish our soul, and honor, and thank the Very High who helps insert us in life? At the end of our tour of the 7 sins about to reach a fever pitch before the end of the world, it is important to recognize that the fight against them is a battle that must be waged from within. Each sin, egoism, greed, immorality, blasphemy, complacency, arrogance, and ingratitude, points to a tendency players should reflect on in their own conduct, their own ideas, and their own impact in the world. The words that spring from the scriptures can issue a warning, but they also offer guidance on how to follow the path into hell and out of it. This guidance, humility, compassion, and growth is available to those who choose to embrace it. The exercise itself is meant to be one that inspires action, that each person must decide whether they will be pulled towards vice or whether they will resist these tendencies to nurture a world of love, respect, and gratitude that counters the prophecy of the apocalypse. As the future comes into clearer view, we should look back into history and the works of our faith traditions and work in tandem to influence it in ways that respect the sacredness of our humanity and the planet we inhabit together. The way ahead is to fight against these sins with hope and resilience. We can change the tide of these sins and rise towards hope. If we continue to have these conversations, if we ask questions, and if we root it all in some old foundational wisdom.